Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have a really cool preview for you guys today from a brand new brand actually called Reise. They are a new micro brand upstart, and essentially their founder was a key designer from a very popular micro brand, which you might have seen around. I don't want to name drop because really the founder, he really doesn't want to build off of that. He wants to start his own thing, really build it from the ground up, and I can appreciate that. The name is actually German for traveling or voyage, and of course it's all about that forward motion, right? And moving on, moving up, and really just keeping going forward. So the founder of the brand, I think that is a really cool kind of tribute. He was really, and the reason why it's a German word, of course, is because he was inspired by his own personal Zen U1 with its clean, simple lines and scratch resistance. I think it really works out, and then of course the translation of also symbolizing forward motion and moving forward with your career onto the next venture. I think that's really cool. So a little bit about this type of watch. This is of course considered kind of that everyday adventure watch. Some key common characteristics and design language you're looking for that watch that you can wear every day for really go anywhere, do anything type of adventure. You're gonna want something, of course, that's sporty, legible, and tough at the end of the day. And I think this watch, known as the Resolute, will be just that. So this is a prototype preview. This actually hasn't been released yet, but it will be coming to Kickstarter eventually. But things could change. Maybe they'll end up doing just a full rollout. But at this point, I believe a Kickstarter is the plan. The full price is going to be planned for $399, but basically pre-order pricing will be down to $279. And for that, I think you're getting something really, really special. So with all that said, let's go ahead and actually take a closer look. Okay guys, now this watch is a looker, I gotta say. If I can get it to focus, there we go. Man, this is a handsome watch. I love the minimalist design. I love that it's, you know, enthusiast run, because there's just little details that are here that, you know, somebody who is a watch enthusiast who's within the community really focused on. They kind of paid very close attention to very minor things, and actually did a great job delivering on them. Look at that dial, the very subtle texturing there. It's not just a matte dial, it has a nice texture to it. We do have these applied indices there. I love the clean layout, the frame to date, of course, and then the minute hand is getting over that. We have this really nice large crown, which is screw down, which is absolutely amazing, which does offer, you know, water resistance that you can actually trust. I mean, I would much rather have a screw down crown with 100 meters of water resistance versus sometimes I've seen you know, watches that will boast 150 meters of water resistance with just using special gaskets that don't have screw down crowns. I'd much rather feel more secure with something like this. I also like the width of the crown. It's quite large, but it doesn't stick out a lot, which I think is really nice. And one thing you'll notice is that this is full titanium, and there's a slight difference in the tone. You can see on the back it's not coated, it's a bit darker, kind of used to what you're seeing, you know, the color you're used to, but the coating on here is actually this really interesting hard coating that adds so much hardness, which we'll get to kind of as we move on through. But let me just quickly go through some of these specs. 40.5 millimeter diameter, which is great, and that is actually including the crown guards, guys. So that's counting from here to this outer edge here of the case. But if we were to measure the more traditional measurement, like from 2 to 8 o'clock, that doesn't really include any of those flares there, guys, it's only a 39.5, which is kind of my sweet spot for a watch like this. I think that's absolutely amazing. So again, the larger size is measuring this flared portion and also all the way out to the crown guard. So it's almost being measured as if it's an asymmetric case. But I think because you do have this point here, right around 8 and 2 here, if you measure that, it actually is just 39.5. So for me, this is really going to wear more traditionally like a 39.5 or a 39, which is great. It's only 11.5 millimeters thick. It's 46 millimeters lug to lug. You can see those nicely drilled lugs there. This is full titanium matte blasted with this ultra hex coating, which actually adds up to 1200 HV in the hardness vigors. So that's pretty nice, guys. And it really gives you that extra level of assurance, because I know there are some misconceptions about titanium. Some people think, oh, well, titanium is softer than steel. It's not. It's harder than steel. In pretty much every measure. The thing is, of course, when something's harder, it can be a little bit more brittle. But really, it's not even titanium that's brittle. It's just the outer oxidized layer that ends up being able to kind of pick up the surface level scratches. So that's something that is a bit of a misconception. But the nice thing is, with the hard coating, it makes it even more resistant. Basically, it protects that outer oxidized layer, which is great. So now you're going to have something that is ultra lightweight. I mean, and the nice thing is, since it's a mechanical timepiece, it doesn't feel cheaply light, but it does feel really just well balanced and just dialed in, which I think is really beautiful. Now, as far as the crystal goes, it's actually a flat sapphire with inner AR coating, and this thing has got a lot. They call it super AR because it has basically 10 to 12 coats of inner AR coating. And as you guys can see, I bring it up very close. There's no crystal there. You know, it's only until you get some real flares there from the studio lights to see that, okay, there's some reflections that nothing's gonna be able to navigate. But as you can see, boom, guys, that is it's crystal clear. Pun intended, which I think is really great. Now, the crown, as we mentioned before, is screw down and signed at the 3 o'clock. It has, and lined up really perfectly, it has this really nice kind of debossed logo, which I think is really quite lovely and handsome and modern. And you can see all of these edges and contours here just help the watch feel very, very modern. It feels like, you know, like something from the mind of a fighter, a fighter jet. Yeah, it's just it's in that same vein. It has these really cool angular facets to it, which I think add a lot of visual interest and help it not look like something else. And I think, although it reminds me very much of a watch I have in my collection, but not because of its looks or anything like that. It's really because of the thematic play and what it is, and the way it was executed, and really the high quality. So we'll bring that up here a little bit further, but let's finish going through some of these basic specs there, guys. The movement inside, although you can't see it, it's a Seiko NH35, which is the reason why this thing is so affordable, even at full price at $399. When you're thinking about a really awesome, rugged tool, go anywhere, do anything type of watch, that's an extremely great price. And then, of course, with the NH movement, it's going to be extremely reliable. And I think within that price point, it's completely fair to have a movement like that in here. And honestly, when it comes to shock resistance, the Seiko NH movements are going to be, and any movement as well, not any, A-N-Y, but N-E, like the NE15. Basically, those Seiko movements have been proven to have just better shock resistance in general. So if you're going to want something that's a little bit sportier on that side, then it's nice to have this movement versus something like a Miyota, which are not bad movements by any means. But I think I can see here it's still quite thin with this movement, so there really wasn't any benefit, I would say, apart from just maybe a smoother sweep. Really not much of a benefit to go over to a Miyota movement. And it's nice that they kind of kept this at a really nice price range, especially when you consider that pre-order pricing at $279. So the dial is a beautiful matte black dial. It has applied indices. You can see the matte hands, which are really, really well done. It actually uses Swiss Superluminova. It glows green with blue accents, so you're going to see different types of lume once we get over to the Lume Shots. It is 100 meters or 10 atmospheres of water, water resistance, which is great. And they actually use Viton gaskets, so this is legitimately water resistant. This is not just one of those things they print it on there and then it's like they tell you that you can't swim with it. It's not recommended or anything like that. This is something that is genuinely water resistant, and you can take it a couple of meters down and really feel completely secure. Now, the lug width is great as well, which helps make this kind of a strap monster. It's 20 millimeters, which is great, so it's going to be compatible with all your favorite NATOs and also other two-piece straps as well. The strap that comes with it is actually really cool. It's this nice custom canvas strap over leather, and then it has signed titanium hardware. For me, I feel like the strap is a little bit, I guess, like a little bit overly matte. I feel like I almost think that like a more satiny rubber strap might look better, but I think, you know, out of the box this thing looks great. I think maybe like a cordura with just a little bit more of a sheen to it would play a little bit nicer with this setup, but you know, by all means, that is just kind of nitpicking, because this is actually quite nice, and it was pretty easy to break in. Essentially, you just kind of twist the strap and roll it around a little bit, and then it just gets a lot softer because there are some padded layers there. So very quickly, before we jump into the wrist shots, let me just show you guys what I think this compares really well to my Damasco DS30, guys. And you can see there the case. I mean, the only similarities that they have is probably the proportions. We got a 39 and essentially a 39. And then you just have a really minimalist design. You know, obviously the German influence there is felt. But then, like, you look at the case, it's just a completely different case, completely different, you know, everything really. But the thing that I really enjoy that carries over is just that minimalist monochrome look. It's just grays and blacks and white, and I think it all just plays and ties really well. Also, you're seeing the black date disc is another commonality. Actually, whoa, man, this thing's got a little bit of dust on it. Let me just wipe that off really quick from the Damasco. And you can see here, guys, it's a very similar, I think, use case, and you can probably, and then we have, of course, hardened submarine steel versus hardened titanium. So there's, you know, they're both great watches. I love this one. I own it, but I do plan to pick up one of these when they are in production, just because I think it's beautiful. I can't wait to kind of play with it with straps and see where it goes. But I did want to mention the Damasco because I feel like, although it's a very different approach, I think it's a very similar formula, right? So although the execution is much different, here you're going with applied indices and all that side of it, and then you're also, you know, getting framed hands versus just the kind of all business side of the Damasco here. But you know, they have very similarly really well coated anti-reflective coatings on these flat sapphires, you know, and then the very minimalist clean aesthetic. Here, of course, both of them have black date discs, which is great, but to go with these applied indices, you get a nice frame there. And then, of course, this is all printed. Even the lume is also similar, so really nice from that standpoint. But let's go ahead and actually get this piece here on the wrist for a closer look. All right, guys, so this Resolute is looking outstanding on my 7¼ inch wrist. Bring it up close here. Of course, with some lens distortion, it's going to seem maybe a little bit oversized. But once you get my arm down in here and you get a little bit of better perspective, maybe a little extra arm there out to the elbow, you can see that this thing fits really well. I love the flat profile, but it still has these great contours that give you such visual interest there, guys. The way the light plays off of this matte finish is really, really wonderful. Sure, you know, having brushed finishes and all high polished facets and stuff, that's all great, and you know, don't get me wrong, I still appreciate that, but something about a matte case, if you can still get some wow factor, then it just goes to show that there are just some things, you just got good bones. There's just good lines here. They don't, you know, there's no finishes, you know, there's no tricks, I should say, within the finishing. It's really just accentuating a wonderful, I mean, look at that micro bevel that goes across that bezel right there. I think it looks great. It catches the light. There's multiple layers, so it's just not flat. Although it's a matte finish, it's not flat, right? Like, there's flat facets, but the way the light hits it, it just causes all these little high contrast areas, which really make it fun to look at. And I mean, there are some really intense kind of color combinations, but I think this kind of monochrome style for me is my favorite, and obviously ties it kind of the most into the German minimalist styling, which I think it does a great job of nailing. But yeah, no, this thing's awesome looking, and I gotta say that I just love the way this thing turned out. Everything's balanced. The dial is just super balanced, and it has just a great again, that fighter jet appearance to it. I love these facets and angles that they really painstakingly that they really took into consideration, and they made something a little bit more exciting. They could have easily made something very plain, and I think it's nice that they have a very minimalist aesthetic while not being super plain in terms of things like the case, because it is actually quite an exquisite design. But with that said, let's actually get some low light transition and Lume Shots going for you. All right, guys, we'll go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, the Lume is absolutely beautiful. It's not a dive watch, so there's not a lot of surface lume there, but the lume that is there is really nice. You can even see the blue contrast against the green, really beautifully done. But one thing you guys know about me, I like to do this low light transition and not just keep it in pitch black, because you're not always going to be in either pitch black or super well lit direct sunlight. You guys are going to spend the time with your watch, you know, coming in and out of buildings, in and out of vehicles, maybe walking underneath an overhang or two, or, you know, getting underneath the shade of a tree. So one of the nice things is, you know, you can kind of see the way the colors will actually render a little bit truer to life here. And you can also see the textures there, guys. Of course, normally you could look at some brushing and the fineness or whatever in the bracelets when you're doing transition, or if you have like a really crazy sunburst dial, it'll also give you a nice idea of the way those colors render. Here with the more monochrome and minimalist aesthetic, there's not as much to appreciate, but man, I gotta say, if you just look at the way the light still plays off of this case, even when I come in with the harsher, you know, very high contrast lighting here, these angles just play really, really well. This is a very, very handsome timepiece, and I gotta say, I am very, very impressed with it. I mean, if I was the one designing this watch, I don't even know what I might change on it. I mean, besides maybe having it come out on like a matted satiny rubber strap or something like that. Everything else, I mean, a bracelet would also be wonderful, and I think is going to actually be a stretch goal. But guys, let's go ahead and get into some closing thoughts on the wrist. This thing has those perfect Goldilocks proportions, even the dimensions themselves. As far as size goes, this thing is amazing. It's super lightweight without feeling insubstantial or cheap, which is great, because that's always a fear with titanium watches. When they're so thin, you can't help but kind of equate the heft to quality, and the lack of heft to a lack of quality from time to time, right? It's just the nature of the beast. The nice thing here is you're actually getting a really well-balanced package that, although very, very light, it doesn't feel cheap in any way, which is great. I mean, I've had some titanium watches where they almost feel like wood. It's just confusing for my brain to process. Here, I think they did a really good job with the balance, because I think with the case shape, it did allow there to be certain levels of mass there that still retain enough of a solid feel. Also, the movement inside, you know, adds a little bit of heft to it, because it is a mechanical movement, versus if they were to put something like a quartz in here, this thing would probably just fly right away. Now, model variations go, definitely check the site for current availability. I know that there's going to be some stretch goals introduced and all that side, and you never know as these things develop. This is a very early look, guys. Again, comparable models. This does remind me a bit of my Damasco DS30, but you know, this definitely, I'd say, has a less cluttered dial and a more complex case. So they for me made improvements over the Damasco. I still love the Damasco, but and also one thing to note is these DS30s now come with 20 ATM versus the 100 meters of water resistance, or 10 ATM or 10 atmospheres that I have on mine, because mine is like straight up like Gen 1 A1. Just as soon as they were released, I got one because I loved it. And then later on, of course, I find out they switch a couple gaskets around and get extra water resistance. Here, with the Racer, it already has great water resistance. I think it would be cool if they could increase it just a hair, but I think at the thickness and everything, it might not be worth it. I think the balance you have right now is pretty perfect. And honestly, at the cheaper price range, I think it's completely acceptable to have only 100 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown, hardened titanium case, faceted hardened titanium case. So there's just a lot to love there. Really, guys, bottom line, this is probably my absolute favorite new modern Gata watch, as in go anywhere, do anything. This, I mean, it's just special, right? And it's modern. And there's other watches that really key in more to kind of more classic and vintage aesthetics. The thing that I love about this watch and this brand is they really bring something new and modern to the space. And I think they're really, you know, these I hope they take off, because I love them. And I guess it'd be a nice reaffirmation for my particular tastes to find out that other people really enjoy this piece too. So if you definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.